you so much to everyone who helped to bring this presentation together. As mentioned, my name is Lauren Lofton. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm a senior staff attorney at LegalLink. Um, I would like to share just a little bit about LegalLink's mission. So our mission is to remove legal barriers that prolong poverty by adding critically needed capacity to the legal ecosystem. We are a nonprofit that's based out of Oakland, so Ohlone Territory, serving 10 Northern California counties, including Alameda. We provide training, free consultations for caseworkers, social workers, community health workers, community organizers, anyone who's providing direct frontline support within our communities. So we are your resource for all things legal. And you can always email us, call us, or we have an easy Calendly sign up tool where you can find a time to meet with us for free regarding your client issues. You're also welcome to have your clients join those appointments. I want to share a little bit about the legal landscape, what that looks like. Most attorneys are what's called specialists, meaning that they know a very specific part of the law in a lot of detail. But the attorneys at LegalLink, we really hold the big picture across the legal landscape on many legal topics. So we're what's called generalists. And we work with expert legal specialists and our network of over 100 legal service providers to provide training to our community on an ongoing basis. We also created a referral search tool that we're going to show you how to use today to help you refer clients to free and low-cost trusted legal service providers. I'm also going to provide you with an overview of the big picture of our services and the support tools that we can offer you in this immigration space. We did provide you with an opportunity to opt into receiving our newsletter, The Navigator, where we will have training announcements and also where we give you legal updates on changes in the law. So we encourage you to sign up for that and to keep an eye out. So what are we going to cover today? This training is meant to give you a brief overview of who we are, meaning who LegalLink is, what support we offer, and how you can best use our tools and resources to support the clients that you work with. So we're going to talk about something called the community justice work and the justice gap. We're going to have an overview of legal issues and available support. We're going to talk about what it means to deliver community justice worker support to clients, and we're going to go over some post-election updates. So next up, we're going to go ahead and just talk a little bit about this definition of what community justice work is. It's helping a member of your community to surface unmet legal needs, identify legal issues, and access legal protections. So who are community justice workers? What does that term mean? Community justice workers are non-lawyers who provide legal support to their clients and their community with training and supervision that comes from legal nonprofit experts such as LegalLink. So folks just like you, housing coordinators, consumer counselors, social workers, health workers, domestic violence advocates, all of you folks have the opportunity to engage in some early intervention, help screen individuals and families for legal problems, and then provide resources, legal information, and referrals. You can also provide additional forms of support that we'll talk about in just a little bit. We do want to share the why for community justice work. Why is this important and why do we need community justice workers? So we're going to share a little bit about what's called the justice gap and the need for legal aid lawyers. For people who can afford to pay for an attorney, which is expensive, it's hundreds of dollars an hour, there is typically one lawyer for every 244 people. So just to see a show of hands in the chat, show of hands virtually or physically, do y'all think that's better or worse for low-income people? You think that number gets better or worse? Thumbs up if you think it gets better, thumbs down if it gets worse. Yeah, definitely worse, but a lot worse. So there is one legal aid attorney for every more than 8,000 people that are in need of legal assistance. And this is what we are referring to when we say that there is a justice gap. There's a huge gap between the number of people that deserve to have and receive legal support and care and the number of available attorneys to provide that care. Here in the Bay Area, we have over 100 legal aid providers, and so we're in a much better position than many other especially rural communities and states outside of California. But it is still challenging to find help for our clients. So we're going to talk a little bit about why that early intervention is important and how you can help, and also a little bit about how members of the public are experiencing the legal system right now. So this next slide shows how folks are experiencing the legal system. We can see the words unfair, complicated, discriminatory, racist, confusing, inaccessible, right? And in an ideal world, these words would be flipped. The legal system would be experienced as just, fair, understandable, accessible, and unbiased. And this is where you all have an opportunity through early intervention to support. So the good news is that it isn't just about lawyers serving clients when it comes to legal support. There is an opportunity, and we know, in fact, from our research, that what people need is not always a lawyer. What they really need is a trusted person with the ability to navigate legal procedures and rules. And you all are already trusted people in the community. So we provide you with training like this in order to add some key skills to navigate the legal system. And once you have those skills in your professional toolbox, you can integrate those tools into the work that you're already doing, the conversations you're already having with individuals and families, right? The places where you see that folks are already in need of additional support. So to orient you a little bit into our network and the folks that we provide services to, this shows some of our organizations. We partner with more than 70 community-based organizations to provide education, training, and free legal consultations. And you can see where First Five falls in this network. So y'all are already a part of this network, whether you are aware of it or not. And we would love to have you start to utilize us as a resource if you're not doing so already. We do need to give you a little caveat before we hop into those tools about what your role is as a community justice worker, which you can and cannot do. There is a lot that you can do in your existing role. So in your existing role, you can help identify that there's a legal issue in the first place. Many of our individuals and families that we encounter know that they're having a barrier, they're experiencing a challenge, but they're not necessarily able to identify that this is a legal problem that has a legal solution. So part of what you can do is just be thinking, is this a legal problem? Not just something that's difficult that's happening in the person's life. You can also assist with follow-up and logistics. So you can help gather paperwork, you can help them get organized, create a timeline of what happened and what's going on for them and what their needs are. You can help them write down what their goals are, questions that they have when they talk to a lawyer. All of that is supported. You can also provide non-legal accompaniment to court appointments to help make sure that they're not missing court appointments, or if they're feeling really anxious to go by themselves, you can go with them. And you can help with a few other things. I'm going to pop those all up on the screen. Providing things like referrals and legal information, FAQs, all of that is within your realm and totally okay to do. There are a few things that you can't do, so we want to surface those right now. You cannot say that you're an attorney when you are not an attorney. So never hold yourself out to be an attorney. You can't tell your client how to win a case, what you think they need to say or do or put in paperwork in order to win or have things go well for them. That is legal advice. We don't want you doing that. And again, right, deciding what goes specifically in their court paperwork. You can't do that, right? But you can help provide them with forms, FAQs, information from the courts. All of that is definitely within your realm. There is a rule in California. It's called the unauthorized practice of law. So non-lawyers are not allowed to give legal advice or engage in the unauthorized practice of law. It is actually against the law to do so. But there's a lot of other things. You can see that list on the left is much longer than that list on the right. So we want you to feel confident at everything that you can do and not discouraged from providing assistance. We find that oftentimes folks that are on the front lines go, I'm not a lawyer, I can't tell you anything, right? But there is a lot of information that you can provide that is well within your realm. And we want you to be encouraged to use these FAQs to help support folks when they do have questions. We also want you to become familiar with what legal issues can look like. So when you're helping clients to identify a legal issue, these are the main buckets that we want you to be thinking about. We show them to you in this way because this is how these issues are grouped to find assistance. So you want to be searching for assistance using these categories. And that's how our referral search tool and information and tools are built on our website, which we will show you in a little bit. So be thinking about, is this a benefits issue? Is this a credit and consumer issue? Is it a criminal and tickets issue? Could it fall into family or relationships, housing, immigration, or work? And we'll give you a few detailed examples up on the screen for you to become familiar with. If you are seeing these issues with your clients, there is legal help available to support. There's legal information available to support. And most families that are experiencing legal problems, these issue areas really cover 90 to 95% of what you're going to see with clients. Most of the problems fall into one of these buckets. Also, most families are experiencing not just one legal problem, but anywhere between 2 and 6 legal problems at a time. So it's important to be able to assess what problems they're experiencing and what legal information and referrals are available to help with this. We are going to go ahead and share just a few key referrals here up on the screen. You do not need to memorize these. We do not want you to attempt to memorize these. Instead, we want you to become familiar with our referral search tool that we'll show you in just a moment. But we want you to know that there are lots of organizations that are providing assistance for immigrants. So know that there's a lot of help and resources available and that it's not limited to what you see here on your screen. So what resources are available on our website? We have curated referrals. So you can view those referrals in multiple languages, including Spanish. There are also key online tools and resources from trusted service providers available for you. Many of those are also available in multiple languages. And we have tools that we've created. So if we see a gap and there isn't an existing FAQ and we're getting a lot of the same questions from our community-based organizations, we may create a tool with an expert in order to have that information available at your fingertips to provide to clients. We're going to actually show you how these tools work on the website. So we're going to head over to our website in just a moment to show you where you can find all of this information. So on the Legal Link website itself, this is the homepage. There's 2 ways to get to our resources and tools. One is right down here when you scroll down to the bottom. The other is up at the top under resources. When you click down, you'll see our referral search and then other tools. We always suggest that you start with our referral search tool. So if you are searching for legal help, you're going to click on the referral search tool. It's going to take you to a portal where you can select the county. Here we're going to select Alameda County since that's the county that many of you serve. And you're going to go ahead and pick the county where either the court case is pending or where the person. So let's say it's Alameda County and we go to the next step. It's then going to ask, which bucket are you in? So earlier when we looked at those different legal issues that most families are experiencing, right? These are those same buckets I was talking about. So let's say here it's an immigration issue. And then let's say that the person is in removal or deportation proceedings, and we want to find some legal help for them with that. If I click on removal, here we have 17 referrals that pop up. This is a list that includes what we call good first calls. So we have already sorted all of these to tell you which programs are most likely to be able to assist with this issue. So if you just use a search engine like Google or Yahoo and you're trying to find referrals, you can get a lot of results, and those results are usually in alphabetical order. It doesn't tell you what's the best one to start with, what's their referral process, and you might have to dig around on the website to find that critical information. But you can see here, for instance, if I open this Bar Association Attorney of the Day program, it's going to give me all of the referral information right here. It's going to tell me the phone number, the hours, any eligibility criteria that they have, and all of the counties that they serve, right? So even though this program is in San Francisco, you can see that they actually serve Alameda County right here, which is why they also came up in the search. I'm going to go back to the results to just show you that in addition to these good first calls, there are more organizations that are then listed in alphabetical order that you can try if you don't get any traction with those good first calls. And then there's helpful resources here on the right. And this will take you out to the resource directly. We're going to highlight these resources later and in the training, and we'll also be sending out these resources as well after the training. But they'll pop right up also when you do this referral search. And these are great resources that you can offer directly to the clients as well. So in addition to our referral search, we have our information and tools page. And right here, you can see we have a court record retrieval site option. So there, if you want to know if there's an active case, there's an option to check in that county. For instance, if there's maybe an open criminal case that's happening. We have some screening tools and key tools that are great for caseworkers to have on hand. And then we have resources by legal area, including immigration. So you can see many key immigration resources here, which again, we'll be sharing many of these out at the end of the training. So this is our website. We really encourage you to become familiar with it and to start practicing using those tools and to use them in real time with your clients. So when your client has an issue, to pull the website up, to do the referral, those resources that come up. We're going to go ahead and hop back into our slide presentation in just a moment. Bear with us. And then we're going to switch on over to our immigration portion of the training now that you have an idea of who LegalLink is and how to use the resources, tools, and referrals on our website.
Lauren, quick question. Somebody was asking
Yes,
if that
Aura.
goes into a printable format.
A printable format for the referrals. Yeah, you should be able to print that out. And there's a few ways to do that. So if you have any issues with that, you can email me directly for support. And then flyers and cards that we can share. Yeah, so we can also send that as follow-up information to the First Five team. Yeah, thank you for that question. Okay, so we're going to hop into talking about immigration. We know that with the recent election results and executive orders, there's a whole lot of fear about what might be changing and when it might be changing. We do want to offer some reassurance that there are legal protections that are currently in place. So, for example, the Trump administration has attempted to end birthright citizenship, but many attorney generals sued in response, and a federal judge blocked that attempt. So, every attempt that's made that is discouraging, there are also advocates and attorneys that are fighting back and that are pausing wherever they can things from going into action and are suing to prevent these attempts to negatively impact our communities. A few high-level takeaways, things that we want you to know when you leave this training. Everyone, regardless of their immigration status, has basic legal rights. There are multiple paths to legal status, and that it's really important to help interested clients to get on a path to status as soon as possible. We're going to talk a little bit about that path to status in just a moment. We also want to highlight that our communities are really resourceful and resilient and that we are all stronger together. So you really do have an opportunity to help here. And part of how you can help is really holding that hope, even when things are challenging, even when there are things that are shocking and scary in the news, really helping people know and rest assured that they do have rights and they do have people in their corner that are here to support, including many attorneys and advocates. We want you to understand a little bit about the different categories that folks can fall into or buckets that people can fall into in terms of their legal experiences as immigrants. So we have this immigration framework to help you understand that path to status, what it means to be on a path to status. So being on a path really refers to when someone moves from being undocumented or undetected to having a visa or some other form of status, which later allows them to get a green card and eventually apply for citizenship. So we want everyone on that path. and as far along that path as possible, because the further along you are in that path, the closer you are to safety from deportation or removal. The most challenging part is getting an initial intermediate legal status. Once someone is trying to adjust to a green card and apply for citizenship, things are much more straightforward. They move faster and it's much easier to get assistance. As you see here, we have arrows that are going in different directions, and that's because in immigration, we have a few different groups of people that need different kinds of support. And you can move actually from one category to another between the removal and the undocumented undetected, which is why those arrows are going in multiple directions. So we're going to start with the removal deportation category or bucket. People who really are already in removal or deportation proceedings, and they need legal assistance to defend themselves against an active deportation case. So usually folks that are in removal proceedings have crossed typically the southern Mexico border and are caught or turn themselves in to ICE or customs officials. That includes children and youth who do not have an adult with them. The term for that is unaccompanied minors. So once they are stopped, the government begins a case against them in immigration court to have them removed. And each individual is assigned what's called an A number, A like apple. That corresponds with information about mandatory court hearings. When people are stopped at the border, they're typically held for a period of time. Sometimes it's just a few hours, and then they're released, sometimes with an ankle bracelet and a requirement to do regular check-ins with ICE, and sometimes without any ankle monitor accompanying that release. And even with recent changes at the border, we want you to know that it's important to know we have millions of folks that are presently living in the United States who have had this experience. And so when you ask them screening questions, one of the things you can ask were you stopped at the border? Were you held? Were you released with any paperwork? Did that paperwork have an A number on it? Right? Just getting that information will tell you that person is already in removal proceedings. They need to find legal help in order to have a defense to that removal, and some important next steps that you can take with them in terms of showing up for their court hearings, not missing a court appearance, which could lead to the issuance of a removal order, and important information and tools about things like how to keep their address up to date so that they're not missing important information that may be sent to them about their proceedings. So next up, we're going to talk a little bit about some of those interventions that are available for undocumented, undetected folks. So one of those is just letting folks know that there's an option to affirmatively apply for legal status, meaning if they're undocumented and undetected, they haven't been stopped and taken into custody by ICE or Border and Customs officials. They have not been issued an A number, right, because they haven't been intercepted by customs officials. And they're undetected, meaning the government doesn't know that they're there, that they're here. But they do have the option to affirmatively apply for legal status and really initiate the case because the government doesn't have a case initiated yet. For those folks, there are some really critical deadlines that we do not want them to miss, including the deadline to apply for asylum. So they have 1 year to apply from their arrival with some really narrow exceptions, and we don't want them to miss that window. If they do miss that window, there are other potential paths to status, but we really want them to get assessed by an attorney before they have missed that 1 year deadline. Even if they have missed the 1 year deadline, it's critical to get them assessed by an attorney to see what their options are. Next up, we're going to talk about this affirmative bucket, this folks that are already on this path to citizenship have already applied affirmatively for status. So they might have applied for asylum or a special visa like a U visa. Maybe they've done a family-based petition, and they are moving along that path toward a green card or what's called legal permanent residence status. There are other folks that may also have a temporary status called TPS, temporary protected status. That's usually for people who needed to flee their home country due to a political conflict or a natural disaster. And those folks are not on a path to status by having that temporary protected status. That doesn't lead to citizenship or a green card. So they still need to be assessed by an attorney, and they still need to decide if they want to try to get affirmatively on that path to status. You may have heard the term DACA or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. That's a program that allows folks to work and not be deported, but it's not a path to status. So folks that are actively participating in the DACA program still need to be assessed to see if they can affirmatively apply for a path to status. Some things that you can do are just help folks get to the right place at the right time, right? Not missing that 1 year deadline, getting them to an attorney to be assessed, helping them understand that they do have legal rights, providing them with FAQs. So we'll drop those resources for you at the end of the training. We'll provide those resources for you, and we encourage you to familiarize yourself with them, to actually read through them in advance so that you're familiar with the materials when you have a person in front of you. So we're going to do a little practice together in just a moment to see if y'all are following along with the information we provided. So we're going to launch a poll in just a moment that gives you a hypothetical scenario. Just a moment. So y'all should see this poll now. In this hypothetical, we have a client, Dion. Dion recently crossed the southern US-Mexico border. Dion was stopped and held by officials and released. And Dion believes that they applied for asylum at the border. How can you help Dion? You've got a number of options there. Do you want to ask if they received papers at the border? Do you want to let them know that there's a legal application process? Do you want to ask if they've worked with an attorney before? Maybe give them an FAQ. How can you help Dion? Just going to give y'all a moment to respond. Thank you for your active participation. Okay, so seeing more results pouring in. Some folks are saying, let's get some legal referrals. Other people are saying, let's make sure that Dion knows that there's an application process to apply for asylum. Okay, still see results pouring in. We'll just give y'all another few moments. Okay, let me go ahead and end the poll and share those results with y'all. So most folks said all of the above. That is correct. You can do all of those things. So we want you to be able to become familiar with these intervention steps, right? You want to ask Dion, did they get any paperwork at the border? We want to know whether or not Dion knows that there's an actual application process to apply for asylum. So frequently when folks are stopped at the border, they may have what's called a credible fear hearing to see, do you have a fear of returning to your home country? And clients then think that they've applied for asylum, but they have not actually applied yet. And so just letting them know that they do have to go through a formal application process and getting them connected to legal support that could help them with that application process is a huge step. Wonderful. So y'all are getting this. We're going to talk a little bit about the most common paths to status that folks are able to use. So there are really three paths to status. One is family-based petitions. That's 65% of people. So most folks are going to be trying to get on a pathway to status through their relationship with a spouse, a parent, a sibling, or another close relative. So having folks understand that there are family-based petitions and know if they're eligible for a family-based petition, providing information about that, really helpful. There's also a fair number of people that are able to get on a path to status through a humanitarian pathway. So that's things like asylum, a U visa or T visa for victims of crime or trafficking. That can be both sex work-based trafficking, or that can be just employment work-based trafficking. We see that pretty commonly. There's something called Special Immigrant Juvenile Status and VAWA, or Violence Against Women Act, which provides support and protection for survivors of violence, actually in all gender identities. So it's called the Violence Against Women Act because that is the population that is most impacted by domestic violence and family violence, but protection is available to people of all genders, and that's still true right now. So we want you to notice that DACA isn't on this list because that's not actually a path to status, right? It's a way to temporarily avoid deportation and have the option to work, but it is not a path to status. So if somebody is participating in the DACA program, we still want to see if they may be eligible to get on a path to status one of these other ways. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit about some expected changes with the new presidential administration and also what's staying the same. So where can you offer some reassurance to clients that things are still available? So in terms of asylum, folks do still have 1 year to apply with some very narrow exceptions, right? Again, even if someone's missed the deadline, we want to get them to a legal representation. We want to try and get them screened to see what their options are. In terms of eligibility, this is where somebody has been persecuted or has a well-founded fear of persecution due to their race, religion, national origin, political opinion, or belonging to a particular social group. So LGBTQ plus people, and that is still available right now. An action step that you can take is encouraging clients again to get screened and meet with an attorney. And then in terms of recent legal changes, actually under the Biden administration, prior to Trump taking office, there was a limit to asylum applications that was instituted by President Biden's executive order. And this impacts people who are applying for asylum at the border, except for unaccompanied minors. This is currently working its way through the courts. This change is under debate. And the good news is that the ACLU has previously successfully sued in response to a similar asylum ban during the last Trump presidency and has sued again alongside the National Immigrant Justice Center, the Center for Gender and Refugee Studies, and the Texas Civil Rights Project and others. So with this new Trump presidential term, Trump is likely to let the existing executive order stand. This will impact new arrivals who wish to claim asylum. But again, this is still working its way through the courts. So we'll see what happens here. And in the meantime, you all have an opportunity to help by providing reliable medical documentation for applicants that show that folks should be eligible for asylum because they do have a credible and well-founded fear of persecution. So that is the good news. There's definitely ways that you can help support folks, and asylum is still available to folks. So let's do some practice again together. We're going to have another example, hypothetical via poll. This time, our example is for our client, Esperanza. And you'll see that in just a moment. Okay, you all should see that example. So here, Esperanza fled from her home country because her political opinions and LGBT plus identity caused her to be targeted for harm. So what are some ways that you can help Esperanza? What are some ways that you can help? Can you let her know that she might qualify for asylum? Can you tell her about that 1 year deadline to apply for asylum? Can you use the legal link referral search tool to find some support? Can you give her information about work permits? Great. Great. Looks like y'all are getting this. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and end the poll. Looks like most of you said all of the above. That's right. You can do all of these things. You can tell Esperanza there's a 1 year deadline to apply for asylum and help her to not miss that deadline. You can then use the legal referral search tool to find what those good first calls are for legal referrals. You can help get Esperanza to trusted nonprofit and pro bono or low bono, which is low cost legal help. You can share that if Esperanza does want to apply for some form of status, she might become eligible for a work permit, right? That could be really helpful and reduce some barriers for Esperanza as well. Great. Okay. So what about DACA and SIJS? For DACA, applications have currently been suspended. So no new folks are able to apply for the DACA program right now. But the good news is that those who are still eligible for renewal can still renew. And those that are in the program are still eligible for health insurance, employer sponsorship and visas, and work permits. So it's really helpful if you're able to just screen folks to ask, are you participating in the DACA program and have you renewed? And if they have let their renewal lapse, but it's been less than a year, they can still try to renew. There are also a few narrow exceptions if they have missed that deadline, but it's helpful to get them to legal support right away if they're close to their renewal deadline or if they just recently missed that renewal deadline. For special immigrant juvenile status applicants, those folks are currently eligible for work permits, and we do have young people who are applying for that status and do also want to be able to have the option to work. So again, this is another great early intervention point. This could be reversed by the Trump administration, but it has not been yet. So again, this is a great intervention opportunity to get folks to get screened to see if they could be approved for that special immigrant juvenile status. Unfortunately, the Trump administration did rescind some Biden era protections for families. There was a task force that was focused specifically on the reunification and separation of families. This means that there's likely to be more unaccompanied minors who are eligible for special immigrant juvenile status. So if you have any contact with unaccompanied minors, we want you to be thinking about this potential special immigrant juvenile status because it is still available. We want to share some highlights about work permits. The great news is that there are no changes to the work permit rules at this time, right? Things are changing rapidly, so we encourage you to continue to attend trainings like these to see if anything has changed. But right now, everything is the same. Work permits are often the motivation that your clients have to seek out legal assistance. They might not want to get on a path to status. They might not want to apply. They might not want to actively participate in defending themselves from deportation proceedings, but they do need to earn an income to support themselves and their families, and they may wish to get a work permit to do that. So it can be a really difficult choice for clients who are undocumented to pursue a work permit because they do have to submit an application for some kind of status to be eligible to apply for a work permit. So unfortunately, there's no standalone work permits. You can't get a work permit without trying to get on a path to status, right? But that is possible if you are willing to engage in that process. Letting folks know that they can get assessed by an attorney and talk about the benefits and the potential risks of moving forward with that is a great first intervention point with folks, and letting them know that once an application is submitted, they can apply for the work permit, and they should do that if they have an application they've already submitted to get on a path to status, even if they're not planning to work right now. We want to get as many people approved work permits who are eligible for them right now before there are changes or potential changes to the work permit rules. So again, encouraging folks who are potentially eligible to apply as soon as possible and to get a legal screening as soon as possible. We want to highlight some other resources that are still available that you can encourage your clients to utilize. So public charge has not changed. There's something called a public charge rule, which says that if somebody is a public charge or completely reliant upon the government, that can interfere with their ability to be eligible for citizenship. This creates a lot of fear amongst immigrants that they shouldn't be using public benefits that they are entitled to use and that will not impact their eligibility for citizenship. So under the current law, public charge does not impact eligibility for public benefits such as SNAP or food assistance. And most undocumented immigrants are not eligible actually for public benefits that could make them a public charge or interfere with their ability to become citizens. So one action step that you can do is apply, encourage people to apply for benefits that they may be eligible for in the first place, and encourage people to not drop their benefits or stop using their benefits. We want folks involved in these critical safety net programs, right? We want to make sure that folks are not discouraged from using these critical resources that provide stability for their families. It would be really hard for this rule to be changed also because federal courts have already previously ruled that Trump's attempts to block or change this were illegal. And so his administration would really have to start from scratch and make new arguments. And again, this would potentially be blocked by legal programs that have fought and won when these rights were potentially at risk before. So the only folks that this public charge rule applies for are really folks that are in long-term skilled nursing facilities and who are completely reliant upon the government in terms of living in a long-term skilled nursing facility or other long-term care facility. It does not apply to these other benefits, right? So important to encourage folks, again, to utilize these resources. We're going to go ahead and do a little bit of practice together again. Make sure y'all are following along with the public charge. In this example, we're going to be helping one. And so here, just one moment, y'all should see that poll. Juan is having difficulty being able to buy enough food for himself and his family. So he's interested in using community resources and government benefits to help, but he's afraid that he will be considered a public charge and he won't qualify for legal status if he uses these programs. It's cold and flu season, but he is concerned that if his family receives medical treatment, it could also disqualify him. Which of the programs could Juan safely participate in? So can Juan participate in SNAP, CalFresh? What about WIC? Free or reduced school lunches for the children, food banks? Can this family use COVID testing, Medi-Cal or Medicaid? Which of these programs can Juan and Juan's family use? Seeing those results come in. Great. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. So y'all are right. There's only one kind of benefits that Juan and Juan's family can't use, which is the long-term institutional care or skilled nursing. So if there was a person in the family that was using that person, just that person, not the whole family, could be considered a public charge. But all of these other options, using food banks, those free and reduced school lunches, the COVID testing, the Medicaid and Medi-Cal, WIC, right, SNAP, all of those options are not going to cause Juan or Juan's family members to be considered a public charge and are not a concern. So we want to encourage Juan to use all of those resources. Next up, we're going to talk a little bit high level about those legal protections that are still in place. So the high level takeaway is that most protections are still in place. So even though there's some changes potentially on the horizon, know that we will share what those changes are with you as soon as we learn of them, right? For you to share with your clients. Right now, U visas, T visas, so protections for folks that have experienced human trafficking, protections for folks that are victims and survivors of crimes here in the United States, anyone that may be eligible for asylum or temporary protected status, right? TPS, all of those things are still protected and available. Family-based immigration petitions, the ones that we know most people get on a path to status using a family-based immigration petition, those are still being processed. So there is a possibility that this will shift a bit, but it has not shifted yet. So it's a great time, again, to get our clients evaluated. There is a risk of an increase in detention beds in potential ICE raids or targeting of sanctuary cities, but we don't know what those risks are. That's not known yet. And we do know that California has a strong response to try to help provide protections to immigrant individuals and families. There's no change in that public charge rule, as we just discussed. And there's still the option and right to obtain a valid driver's license here in California. That can be really helpful to have a valid form of identification. That helps reduce the risk that folks will enter the criminal justice system because they don't have that identification. So another early intervention point that you can provide is asking folks if they have obtained a valid driver's license if they are driving, right? Or if they are able to obtain another valid form of identification in case they should have an interaction with the police. So we are going to talk about a recent change that does impact many of your programs. So unfortunately, safe spaces for immigrants have been rescinded, this protection for what's called sensitive areas. And that's sanctuary from ICE in the following safe spaces: churches, hospitals, medical service provider buildings, schools, domestic violence and homeless shelters, and disaster relief centers. So something that you can do is prepare by familiarizing yourself with your internal policies and practices so that you know how to respond in case there is an ICE encounter. You can also provide what's called red cards to clients. Those explain their basic rights. They're available in English and in Spanish. And you can put up Know Your Rights posters in advance so that clients can read them while they're sitting in waiting rooms, become familiar with what their rights are, have this be material that is also able to be distributed throughout the community that they can take with them, right? Having brochures and these items available at front desks, at waiting rooms, at school desks, right? Administrative desks, wherever you can provide that Know Your Rights information so that folks are able to see it. We also want you to know that for areas that are locked, they do have protections. If there's designated private areas that have signage up that says this is a private area and it's locked, you do not have to let ICE officials into those areas. ICE officials do need to have a warrant to enter any of those private areas. And it needs to be signed by a judge, not just by ICE itself. So if they only have an ICE administrative warrant, that is not valid. You do not have to let them search private areas, locked areas in that instance. For those of you that do have locked buildings or facilities, you do not have to let them into the locked building or facility. You can ask for them to show that warrant either by holding the warrant up like to the glass to be able to read it or sliding it under a door rather than unlocking the door for an official. It's important to have a designated staff member. So check in with your supervisor and with your programs to see who is the designated staff member in case there is an ICE interaction, who's the person that is able to ask for that warrant, is able to determine whether or not they can be allowed entry and what areas they can be allowed entry to. You can really help by having clients understand their rights in advance of an interaction with ICE. You want them to know what their rights are, including their right to remain silent, in advance of them actually having a stressful interaction with ICE where they may freeze or may feel like they need to provide information that could be harmful to them. We want you to know that you can also videotape ICE officials and what they're doing, but you cannot interfere with the officers, and that can be considered obstruction. There are many immigration-focused organizations, such as the National Immigration Law Center and the Immigrant Legal Resource Center, that are providing specific training on this. So if you do have a concern about this, we also encourage you to participate in those trainings. And again, if you stay connected with Legal Link, we'll be sharing about those upcoming trainings, and also they will be shared in the resources. We want you to become familiar with an additional form of support, which is something called a family preparedness plan. We encourage all families that have any undocumented family members and just generally to create a family preparedness plan in case of emergency. So that means considering what your childcare options are. That means learning about guardianships, creating a medical plan, gathering all of the documents for the children and the family members in a safe place. So passports and birth certificates, right? Critical information and key contacts in case anyone might be taken into custody. So we're going to share an example of a family preparedness plan with you and the resources that you'll receive. And we encourage you to talk to families just to learn, have they thought about this? Have they thought about who would take their children in case of a detention? Have they thought about what their medical plan is? Right. And it's important to think about these things even outside of the context of immigration or potential deportation proceedings or being detained. Right. We always want to have an emergency wellness and safety plan for our families. So this is an example of the red cards that I was talking about earlier. These know your rights. So we want folks to know that if they're stopped by immigration or the police, they can hand the card to the officer and remain silent. The card really explains that they are exercising their right to refuse to answer any questions until they've talked with a lawyer, right? So they're choosing to remain silent. They're choosing to refuse to answer questions. If they're detained, they want to contact an attorney immediately, and they're not going to sign anything. They're not going to sign any paperwork without speaking with an attorney first. So again, we really encourage you to order these cards for your organizations. You can also print them. So we have heard that sometimes there's some ordering delays because there's been a big rush from organizations to get access to these cards. So if you're waiting on your order, we really encourage you to print some of your own red cards to have on hand, and we'll share that resource with you as well so that you are able to make that available to folks immediately. We want to share some top tips with you to keep in mind anytime that you're supporting folks with a legal issue. So, first, it always gets worse if you don't show up. So, if you don't show up in immigration court, the court could issue a removal or deportation order against you. If you don't show up in criminal court, the judge could issue a warrant for arrest. Second, involved experts have more information than others. So if there was an attorney that previously worked with a family and they wrote a motion, they filed a form, they provided a consultation, it's likely that they have more information than an attorney that would be starting from scratch. So try to get the client to check in with that attorney first before seeking other help. If the client received help with their asylum application and they're now ready to naturalize, it's possible that attorney that helped them with the asylum application could also help them naturalize. Third, we want you to know that contacting an attorney, again, does not commit the client to taking any action. So talking about what their options are to get on a path to status, whether or not they want to affirmatively apply for a path to status, to have the option to apply for a work permit, right? They don't have to then do any of those things. They don't have to take any of those steps if they feel uncomfortable doing so. But talking with an attorney at least lets them know what their options are and to operate from a place of choice. Fourth, contacting an attorney is a privileged communication. So I know that many of you are mandated reporters. Attorneys are actually obligated under our ethics rules to essentially be the opposite. We can't disclose any information without our client's permission, except under very, very narrow circumstances. So if there's an issue that your clients seem really hesitant to talk to you about, possibly because you're a mandated reporter, getting them assessed by an attorney is a great next step because they may be able to then disclose to that attorney that can give them some next steps that will not cause them to be reported. Last and finally, all legal issues have deadlines. So we want you to know that it's really important to share with clients that they do need to get assessed to make sure that they're not going to miss these critical deadlines. So we will have time for Q&A at the end, but I want to make sure to pass it over to the other folks. And again, we will share with you our search tools and our resources. And in the slides, you're going to receive some additional information and support. And we want you to also know, again, that at a high level, we do have this ongoing support available to you. So free caseworker consults, technical support, our legal empowerment trainings, our newsletters, and our ambassador program if you're interested in getting more highly involved with LegalLink. So thank you all so much for your time and attention. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to our next presenters.
Thanks, Lauren. That was a great presentation. While I wait for the presentation to come up, oh, thanks. I wanted to take a moment because I know we're shifting gears here. We talked about legal, and now we're going into how does this actually affect people on a personal level, on a mental health level. So I just wanted to acknowledge, and maybe just everyone can just take a deep breath, and just maybe do some self-care, wiggle down your seat, get comfortable. Because it's going to be a lot more information coming. So I want to acknowledge we are throwing a lot of information here. A lot of information could be, a full day training, but we're just going to go ahead with it. Again, my name is Sonia Svoboda. I am the clinical director at Partnership for Trauma Recovery, and I am going to be doing this presentation with my colleague, Penelope Montevilla. So we'll be doing this together. First, I want to just tell you about who we are at Partnership for Trauma Recovery. If we go back, so we are located in Berkeley. We are on a lonely land. We are coming up to our 10 years this year, which is really exciting. So we work with forcibly displaced populations. So that includes, refugees, asylum seekers, and the other populations that Lauren talked about as well. We are trauma informed, and we do this through providing therapy, case management, support groups. We also do a lot of outreach. And just around helping break that stigma around mental health that a lot of our community carry. The little QR code at the bottom is actually a link to our referral. I'm going to have it at the end too. So if you don't have time to get it now, there will be time at the end. It will also be linked in our in the resources. And I'm just seeing a quick question I can answer. We do provide multiple languages at our clinic. So absolutely yes. We go to the next slide. So just to cover quickly, here's what we're going to go over today. We've done, who we are, and then, I want to thank you all so much for filling out a pre-survey because it actually really helped us understand where you all are coming from. We are going to start with the basic understanding of what is trauma, how does it impact the people that we work with, what's happening with when people are re-triggered, which is what's happening right now. And then giving you all some guidance on how do I actually work with people that have been through the trauma, are being re-triggered. And then last but not least is how do we take care of ourselves as well, because we are going to be profoundly impacted. Before I get into things, I want to acknowledge too that this is something I have said over my years of service in this field is so much of what we say to our clients applies to ourselves as well. And I know there's a lot of anxiety in the room and uncertainty. So maybe just take it with both hands. This is what you're taking for your clients, but also what you might need for yourself as well today. We are not immune from what our clients are experiencing, and what helped them can also help us. And I just want to kind of just establish that as equal playing field in the room today. All right. So a brief overview of what is trauma. Trauma is actually a reaction. It's not the event itself. It's what often happens. It is something that can be, it's a reaction to something that's very frightening, very horrifying. It affects our physical and psychological safety. We often, as humans, we have a response to fight, flee, or freeze. And this is just a normal reaction that our bodies are doing to help us cope. But when we can't escape, that ability to cope gets really overwhelmed, and that's what can lead to those traumatic reactions. It completely shatters our sense of control, a meaning of connection. I imagine a lot of you know this, but the way I think about trauma sometimes in a very simplistic way is if two people get in a car accident, both people may have some really acute reactions, which is normal. And that is our body of trying to regulate and protect ourselves. One person might be okay after that, but the other person may have ongoing nightmares or may be anxious, can't sleep. And so two people can have different reactions. So it's really not the event so much as it is the reaction and the response afterwards. I want to take a step back and go to the next slide. I'm just going to take a little bit of a step back, and what is trauma-informed care? This could be a whole day training, so I just want to recognize that, but trauma-informed care takes the focus away from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. It takes the understanding that, we need to have a really holistic view of our client, where they are in society, where they're in the family, in the community, and look at every aspect of what they are, what they move in. Trauma-informed care looks at widespread impact of trauma. It looks at how is trauma enacting in our families, in our client families, as well as in ourselves as well. So, if you're a trauma-informed care organization, you look at how do we integrate the knowledge of trauma into our policies, into our procedures, into our processes. So I look at it as a structure around a building, and how are we integrating this to everything? And it's an attempt to avoid re-traumatization of ourselves and our clients. It's kind of similar to what I said at the beginning. We are not immune from what our client needs, and I think it's recognizing that us as well carry trauma with us as well, and trying to integrate that knowledge into everything we do. We go to the next slide. So I wanted to share this really briefly. This is a little bit how we at PTR, how we approach our work with our clients if we look at what's called the triple trauma paradigm. And what that means is looking at the different ways that our clients may be moving through trauma. So disruption is the event that might cause them to have to flee their country. So for example, I'm going to pick Ukraine. The war breaks out. You start to question, can I stay here? Can I wait this out? I don't want to leave. This is my home. This is everything I know. And maybe you start to get threats from the government because you're involved in political action. And so then it starts to weigh, can I actually stay here? Am I going to be in harm's way, and it would be safer to leave? And it starts that balancing act of questioning that decision. So then you leave, and that becomes displacement. And that's often that limbo period of, okay, I've left where I belong. I'm not sure where I'm going next, but at least I'm somewhat safe now. And then resettlement is, okay, I'm here to stay. here's where I'm gonna establish my new life, figure out how do I move things forward. So we do an assessment of all these 3 areas. And that is trauma can exist in all 3 areas, which leads to kind of looking at what is the psychosocial impact of trauma. If we go to the next slide, so this will make sense. There is no beginning or end to trauma for our survivors, for our clients that we work as a PTR, and also for many immigrant families as well. When you think about trauma having existed before they ever even saw you. You know, and there may even be trauma prior to the actual event that caused them to flee their country. And so there is, you know, I think it's just recognizing there's trauma in each part, the flight from danger, the journey seeking safety, whether they, you know, went from country to country until they got here. And then there's also trauma when they get here as well. And I really want to recognize that, because sometimes I think we think of people coming here and they're finally safe. But then there's, you know, economic insecurity, there may be racial disparities, there may be language inequity. That can also cause a person to really struggle to land and resettle. So at this point, this is my little brief. I'm going to come back and do things later, but I'm going to hand this over to my colleague Penelope, who's going to walk you through how this actually looks for our clients and what you can do about it. So Penelope, I'll let you take this away.
So I will continue with the next slide, but before continuing with the impact of trauma, I would like to acknowledge that, as Sonia mentioned, we are here together, witnessing together what is happening in our current context and receiving a bunch of information. We are here sharing our own expectations and anxiety and many feelings, and we are here to try to do our best to support our communities, our clients. And I would like to invite you to take a deep breath right now, just connecting how you feel now, just acknowledging how are you feeling. Use your breathing to connect with that. It doesn't matter how you feel. Maybe you feel sad, maybe you feel expectant, maybe you feel angry, maybe you feel anxious. But whatever you feel is important for you to acknowledge right now and just accept it. Because I would like to say that one of the first good interventions that we can do with our clients is being aware of how we are feeling in these moments and how we are feeling when we are accompanying clients. We all know that anxiety can be a very contagious feeling, and the last thing that we want to do is projecting that anxiety on our clients. So being aware of that anxiety, for example, or being aware of whatever feelings is present on us is tremendously important right now. If you feel comfortable sharing your feelings on the chat, you are welcome to do it. If you're not, it's the most important thing is you are aware of that. So as Sonia mentioned, and I want to emphasize that we are all experiencing unprecedented times right now. And when we experience unprecedented times, it's really difficult to have like the correct or the right strategy, like a recipe. And maybe we need unprecedented interventions and considerations. I would like to talk about considerations instead of strategies, because we are human beings talking to human beings, working with human beings. And what maybe works good for one of our clients, maybe it's not working the same with another client. It doesn't work with another client. So being flexible and consider client by client. And I also like to mention that even though we are talking about working with families in this training, I would like to emphasize that I will mention individuals, children, and families, because if we work with a client, with an individual, and we cause a good impact on that individual can cause a good impact in the family system. So this work is systemic. So it doesn't matter if you work with families, it doesn't matter if you work with individual clients or children, the work is there and it's spreading through the system. As Sonia was describing what is trauma, I would like to recognize that for the sake of time, we had to make shorter this presentation, but you have the full slides in the materials. Many of you, if not all, are familiar with trauma and trauma symptoms, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, depression. I know we all are very familiar, so I'm not going to go through in details on that because, as I mentioned, for the sake of time, but I would like to emphasize that and to explain that we all know that our clients, this specific population, most of them fled their countries because they were persecuted and they were suffering traumatic experiences. And impacts of trauma are several, unfortunately, and they can present as a PTSD symptoms, depression, anxiety, as many other symptoms. So where our clients can be stabilized and can be retriggered, for example, with the kind of situations that we are experiencing right now in our current political, social context. So let me emphasize the impact of trauma on memory and attention, for example, because I was listening the presentation for Legal Link that was wonderful, and I was imagining myself also talking to my clients and guiding my clients, offering information, and I was imagining, oh, what can happen, right? So we have to consider that our clients can present difficulties focusing and concentrating, processing and retaining new information, can have a short and long-term memory difficulties, can present dissociation. We can see them like absent and unresponsive, and have an altered sense of time. Okay, so just for us to be aware of that, because I am aware that we all are not therapists, mental health providers, and whoever is treating clients here, teacher, nurses, community workers, therapists, case managers, we should be aware that these are impacts of trauma in our clients, and be careful about clients' reaction, especially these days. There is also impacts of trauma on relationship and trust, because we understand that interpersonal violence shatters people's ability to feel safe in relationship and trust others, and create a sense of disconnection from oneself and from others. For them, explaining their experience can feel really overwhelming, among other things, because they can feel triggered by past trauma. And many survivors distrust their own perceptions as their sense of reality and confidence has been damaged. They can present feelings of helplessness, vulnerability, and shame, and those feelings can lead them to be or to feel powerless and afraid. So we have to consider all this when we interact with our clients, adult clients especially, because it's part of the response, the trauma response. They also can feel intimidated and frightened by those in positions of authority. And it doesn't matter if we are providers trying to help, we represent figures of authority, and we have to keep in mind that, okay? Because it's something sometimes it's very unconscious, present in client's mind. Let's talk about when survivors are overwhelmed. Survivors may feel anxious, frightened, sad, angry, exhausted, and maybe numb. and they can demonstrate different responses when they are overwhelmed. And we should attune to our clients in whatever context we are with them and try to identify this as a trauma response. They can cry in a way that they cannot control. They can be unable to speak, becoming absent, staring into space. Maybe they are giving us confusing answers. We feel like they are not there. Maybe they are, in the worst case scenario, falling to the floor, being able to move, getting paralyzed. And they may feel disconnected and appear emotionally shut down or withdraw. They also can exhibit confusing behavior and incongruent affects, such as laughing or appearing indifferent when speaking of traumatic experiences. I would like to mention an example here. We had a client, it's not a specific client, to be honest. It's a few clients that I share with some colleagues, that there are some clients presenting a narrative very interesting, because when we talk about the current situation, it feels like we are more concerned than them. This is not generalizing, it's just a few clients, because they have too many things in their life to resolve, and they are having issues with their families in their countries. They are having issues here, struggling to eat, struggling to have a house. They are super overwhelmed. And when we mention the top of everything, on the top of everything, what is happening, they don't look like excessively stressed. And we wonder why. I wonder, I don't have a specific answer because it's case by case, but I wonder if it's always can happen that our own anxiety is projected on clients and we feel even more anxious than them. And also, definitely, there is a sophisticated defense mechanisms that clients can show in order to protect themselves, because it's too overwhelming that one thing more cannot be held. So we have to keep that in mind also. And of course, for those of you who work in hospitals or with the physical health of our clients, they present a lot of physiological arousal and physical symptoms that we cannot explain another way. So it's just a trauma response. At this point, we refresh about the impact of trauma in our clients. And we have to remember that our clients suffer tremendous, horrific trauma in their countries. They came here, they are still in the process to heal. The trauma can be very present. And maybe some of them are a little bit stable, some of them are more stable, and suddenly something happened and the trauma is re-triggered, what is very unfortunate. So after a period of safety, it is possible for a survivor to be re-triggered, but direct threats to their safety. We are in that situation, very unfortunately. Or their family members, or renewed reminders of the trauma in their environment. It can be helpful, and we will talk more about that, to recollect the strengths that help them establish a sense of safety for themselves. Re-triggered trauma is similar to the original triggers. In some cases, it can be more pronounced, but the survivor, the good news is the survivor may also have more tools to deal with the symptoms. So the context for many of us here, if not all, is we are working with clients, families, individuals, children who are close to be re-triggered or already re-triggered trauma symptoms. Let's talk very, very briefly about children and trauma, because trauma, the manifestation of trauma in children can be a little different sometimes. But we would like to mention that children listen and absorb and pick everything. They are like little readers. And it's very important for parents to not transfer fear to their children, okay? When we work with families and parents, part of the psychoeducation should be for them to be aware that even if it's a toddler, even if it's 5 years old, it doesn't matter. They are absorbing, energetically, they keep everything, get everything. So it's very important for parents to be aware of that. Children can present regressive behaviors. They are behaving in a weird way. This, for example, for you teachers who work in the classroom with them, or providers who are working with the whole family, if you are witnessing some changes, just keep this in mind, because it's how trauma can be affecting the child. They are not able to verbalize, especially, it depends on the age, and behaviors may seem misaligned to the situation. Obviously, if we talk about trauma and we talk about a specific situation with a 14 years old, it's not going to be the same if we talk to a 5 years old, or if we talk to 7 years old. So we have to be very aware when they are not able to verbalize and how they can show it. We should provide age-appropriate information, and we should educate parents to do that. And very important point is finding spaces for joy and connecting. Encourage family members to share time with children. It's not about quantity time, it's about quality time. They can play, they can feel safe, a little space in the room that they share, in their house. It doesn't matter, the space that they feel safe, and don't lose the connection with the children. And the children connect most of the time through play. And it's very important, the lines of communications being always open between parents and child providers. Child providers should communicate changes to parents and vice versa. It's a support system, and it's very important to stay present as much as possible. This is regarding children and trauma, general things to keep in mind. I would like to talk here about more than considerations. Here we can talk about strategies, because it's how to behave, the provider can behave. We say here to support survivor understanding, but I would say to improve providers' communication also, because it's bilateral. We should slow our speech and our instruction. Imagine that you are talking to your clients about what is happening with ICE right now, and the protocols, and the Know Your Rights card, and all these things. And you are anxious, and your client is more anxious than you. So slow your speech and your instruction, especially when you are working with interpreters. Also, this is very important, because the clients are using their own primary language. Using a soft and gentle tone of voice is a way to create a containment. The containment for the client, soft, gentle, that the client can connect with you, even the client doesn't talk in your language. The repetition of the information is very welcome. We can offer many different kinds of explanations to enhance comprehension. And checking with the client to be sure that our clients are understanding what we are saying. We can ask him for clarifications whenever need. Please never take for granted that the client is understanding you because he's nodding, okay? Just check with the body language and ask questions. For example, you can say something like, I notice you seem to go away with your thoughts for a moment. If you notice that your client is not there, did you hear what I said? Or would you like me to say it again? Just reframe the situation in order to be sure that your client is with you, is following you. There are common experiences of survivors in relation to professionals, and this is important for us to keep in mind always, but in this context is very, very important. Why? Because our clients always feel vulnerable and dependent. They can feel shame, a sense of being exposed. They can have feelings of fears and intimidation. They feel powerless and helpless sometimes. And these times, I cannot even imagine how much. Lack of trust or sense of safety. hope and expectation. And in ongoing professional relationships, we often observe there is very present the attachment, because we have this ongoing professional relationship, right? So feelings of attachment and intense wish for protection. So we have to be careful with that, because of course we are here to protect them, but also we have to be very aware that as a providers, we have limitations. And there are things that we cannot provide to our clients, unfortunately, and that's okay. That has to be okay for us, and be open to any feelings that our clients can project on us. Maybe they feel betrayal or disappointment because we couldn't help more, but we should be attuned to our clients for those feelings. I would like to mention some examples that folks, we were talking in my team and with other folks, we have found clients saying they feel unwanted, they feel like the society is not accepting them, they feel rejected, and they feel like they are bothering. So this has been expressed for some clients, and it's very sad. So it's present. And we have examples. I remember one example, one client just went for asking for help. I don't remember, and of course I'm not gonna say where, but she was feeling that the person who was there to provide services, to provide information, didn't treat her very well, and she felt really bad. She felt very sad. So this can happen, and this is probably to happen. So we have to validate our clients in their vulnerability always, and now more than ever. And don't forget that current situation is triggering post-trauma symptoms, and we have to be very present for them when communicated, and we work with them. And I would like to talk, because for me, this is the most important thing, about client strengths and resources. I think after acknowledging how we are feeling, the second best intervention that we can do with our clients now is acknowledging clients' resources and strengths. And there is a concept here called intergenerational strengths and intergenerational transmission of strengths that I really like it, because we always talk about intergenerational transmission of trauma, but we don't talk about intergenerational strengths. So we have to remember that when our clients came to this country and started to work with us as a providers, they already survived. They already went through the most horrible experiences, and they are here. And there is a force that is guiding them. So we have to keep in mind them. Another thing is our clients can't forget that because of the trauma, but it's there. And our work is acknowledge and validate these strengths and those resources they have. They have a strong community. Most of our clients have belong to a community oriented cultures. The community is a resource for strength and connection, and the family. And we have clients, unfortunately, don't have their families here. They have their families in their countries of origin. So we should look for ways to promote connection for those clients with organizations, promoting for clients to make friends, etc. It's very, very important, the community and the family. And obviously, when we talk about strengths, we talk about resilience, and the amount of resilience that our clients present, even children, is amazing. So we should emphasize in the resilience of our clients. We should emphasize on that. And last but not least, the core belief system. The core belief system is an amazing resource our clients present, I have clients who say in Spanish, I'm here because Diosito me ayuda. That means God helps me. And they have survived because God helped them. It means like they have this core belief system oriented to a power source, to a faith, to something that is really important to them. And even if not we believe on that, that's not the point. The point is we have to validate that and encourage the client to don't lose the core belief system. This is part of our work. I think our clients are stronger than we feel sometimes. I always share with my team that I don't like to call them pobrecito, pobrecito mi cliente, poor thing my client. No, they are not pobrecitos. They have strengths, and the best intervention for us, our responsibility is supporting them on those strengths. I would say that as a providers, we should share with our clients also new resources, because fortunately we have it, and we can build practices for our clients to be in the present moment, doing with them grounding exercises, doing with them safety imagery, like a breathing exercises, and it's a way that the client can internalize you as a provider. Oh, my provider, my community worker, or my family advocate teach me this, and I remember this. Or, oh, I have clients who say, every time that I do this breathing exercise, I remember you. So it's the way that they can connect with that extra resource that also is you. And there is something happening actually with the current situation is intrusive thoughts. It's happening because it's a normal trauma response. Clients are having intrusive thoughts, and how to manage these, like do with your client exercises and interventions that help them to be in the present moment. I believe in breathing exercises because you cannot breathe in the future, you cannot breathe in the past, you can breathe in the present. So it's a simple way to help clients to be grounded and regulated. So anything that you can do to help your client on managing intrusive thoughts is very important, because remember, clients' reaction actually are, because of the current context, obviously is because of what is happening now, but it's also a trauma response because they are responding to what happened in the past. And this is unbelievable, it's too much for them. So that makes things more overwhelmed. So everything that brings client to the present is very, very important. And I would like to share with you a little resource that you can share with your clients if you want. I know we talk about this know your rights cards, right? The red cards that are a wonderful support and resource. And talking about resources for our clients, we could manage with our clients for them to write down in a little piece of paper and a little card, little tarjetita, they can write down, remember my resources card. And that remember my resources card, they can write down anything that helped them to feel grounded, to feel in the present, and to feel less anxious when they are experiencing difficult moments. And that can be thinking about something, some experience in the past when I was with my grandma, my abuelita, and I felt very safe with her. So they can think about being with the abuelita, the grandma. They can write down about, I'm gonna do my breathing exercise because that helped me. Oh, I have this object with me, a little doll or a little something that I'm gonna take it. Whatever works for the client, or I'm gonna feel my feet now. So whatever works, because symbolically, having that as a resource for them is very important. And they can write down, and symbolically writing down makes a lot of meaning for them. So be creative in the way that you can help. And don't forget to ask your client, what did you do? What worked for you in the past when you were going through extenuating circumstances, difficult traumatic circumstances, and help your client to remember the resource. And you can also do like a kind of a safety plan with them. It's not a safety plan per se, but it's kind of a safety plan in the sense like you can identify resources that they can get access to. They can get access to people, friends, community, even you as a provider, and even other resources they can have, always with them in these uncertain times. So I will stop here and I will pass the baton to my colleague, Sonia.
Thank you, Penelope. That was a really good reminder. I want to reflect on a couple things. One, I do want to link back to what Lauren said about doing the family safety plans, because that is also a mental health intervention. I just want to point that out. It's, you know, it's a legal intervention, it's also a mental health intervention, helping our families feel safe and that they know what's going to happen. Before I get into the slide, I want to just kind of link something Penelope said. It's a really good reminder about checking in with ourselves and how are we feeling, because that does come out in the session with the client, and making sure our own anxiety is not being projected onto our client and letting them shape that session with how they're feeling rather than how we are feeling. But we are inevitably impacted by this work. It is a part of our field, but I'm going to go through what we can do to mitigate that effect, because you are hearing day in, day out these stories, the challenges, and also resilience of your clients. So it is really common for us to feel overwhelmed. You know, if you spend an 8-hour day meeting with 5 clients, you've heard a lot of stories at that point of hardships, about challenges, about legal challenges, and that can inevitably make you feel hopeless. Believe me, I have been there and I know what that is like. So these are, you know, we may all experience some of these symptoms at times, just feeling disillusioned, feeling anger at the social system. And that is a really common reaction right now, because everything is changing really quickly. And it is not wrong to feel this way. It's just recognizing this is how I feel in this moment. And letting those feelings be valid is really, really important, and not trying to be judgmental about how we're feeling, but just recognizing this does not feel good. We might be really protective and want to protect our clients and be helpful. And I think I always link that back to, do we need to be everything for our clients? Like, what about their resilience? What about their strengths? Because we cannot be everything for our clients. You know, so some other things are just feeling really, you know, a strong sense of responsibility. It's the same thing, you know, just emotionally impacted. I think when we're protective, it's really hard to make those professional boundaries for ourselves. And I think that is really, really important in this field, is to put down those boundaries so that we can keep going for the long haul. I think, you know, and many of us that are in this field are drawn to it because we care, we're compassionate, we're humanitarians. And so we want to do everything we can to help people thrive in the society. And sometimes what happens is we then pour our heart and our beings into this work, and then we crash and burn. And so if we want to be in the long haul, it's really important to have those boundaries around ourselves. And I will go into what that balance looks like in a little bit. I think, you know, underestimating the severity, I have seen this happen in this field, is where you know, we can start making a balancing act, and that can be a protective and a coping mechanism that we start to do to protect our own selves. And then just, you know, I think that sometimes we can start developing that doubt and mistrust, that with our skepticism starts to come in, right? And just starting to feel detached, reject, and feeling like we're rejecting people. So this is a long list of what can happen. A lot of this is actually some people call it vicarious trauma, some people call it secondary trauma. I know that we are all familiar. If we can go to the next slide. So secondary, if we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So as you can probably tell, secondary trauma directly related exposures to trauma and loss and to witnessing survivors suffering. We as providers are a lot more vulnerable to this, and you can only take in so much before you need to start pouring things out. You are not a bottomless jug that can contain all of the hurt and the trauma in the world. And I think, sometimes we enter this field thinking we can take it all in, but you cannot. And I think we just have to recognize our limits. And so secondary trauma is unfortunately a hazard, but I want to kind of go through what that might look like. So if we can go to the next slide, then I'm going to talk about what we can do to mitigate this. So it does involve, and I know a lot of you are familiar with it because I remember some of those pre-surveys. I'm not going to go over it in depth, and this can definitely be like a day-long training that I could, but I'm not, so it's just going to be brief. But when we experience secondary trauma, we have changes to the way that we think, sometimes our physical being, the way that we relate to other people. If you remember the other slide, it changes the way that we see the world. We might become more skeptical. And this is because we've been exposed to all of these sufferings. Something that I have seen in people I've worked with, I've worked as a supervisor for many years, is people say, well, the client, suffered this, it's not as bad as this other client. And I think that is really a way that we try to protect ourselves. We try to protect that exposure to ourselves. I think some people experience changes in their physical being, or they are more skeptical of people around them. We may start to distrust the system because we've seen the system is not functioning the way it is, and we start to lose hope. I think it's so much of it is related to the empathy. It's the reason why we enter in this field, because we care, we're compassionate. But that empathy, if we don't have boundaries, can lead to secondary trauma. And so we have to have those boundaries. You can still be emphatic, you can still be compassionate, but you also have to have boundaries. It can look really like what clients are experiencing. It can be, mild, it could be severe, it ranges in all the intensities. I think, for those of you to supervise the room, it's always important to include this as part of your support for staff. I think if you're experiencing this in the moment, it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to figure out, what do I need to do to change some things? Something that has been sitting with me lately that I'm remembering from one of my clients telling me many years ago was, if I don't have hope, there is no point in continuing on, and trying to find those moments of hope, even in this moment right now where things don't feel so great. They said to me, if I didn't have hope, I wouldn't be here. And that is all I have to cling on to. So some things that we can do to attend to ourselves. We can go to the next slide. There's a lot of things we can do. But something that we have here at PTR, something called the ABC, that I want to just leave you with, is having that awareness. Okay, so right now I'm feeling this. I'm feeling burned out. I'm feeling, I'm not doing well physically. And not judging yourself for that. Like I said, this is something that happens in this field, and just sitting with that awareness. And I think the really important thing is that balance, right? What does your life look like outside of work? Are you having enough rest? Are you having enough joy and pleasure? Like I said previously, we throw ourselves into this work. I have been there. I have been that person that has done and been everything for work and had to learn my lessons the hard way. And I think so finding that balance. And so, I've heard many people, some people say, I need to have a routine after I leave work. For those of you who are dog lovers, they are great helpers in this area of managing your boundaries, because you got to get home and walk them. And you can't just get home and just sit down and cry. You've got to walk them. They are excellent helpers in boundaries. And so I think figuring out what that balance looks like, you can also think about it. What do I have left in my jug today? What do I need to pour out? What's my balance between trauma and joy? Something I used to think about a lot for myself is, what's my trauma intake today? How do I balance that out with something else that is not all about trauma? Because my work is all about trauma. And so balancing that with something fun and joyful and pleasurable. And then lastly, finding those connections, right? Whether that is between you and your team members, whether that is in a personal and just finding those moments in community. I know at PTR we love getting together. We love, and it doesn't have to be, we're not talking about the work. We don't have to talk about that, but it's just finding that sense of joy with each other and who we are as human beings, who we are outside of the work. And I think that's what that balance piece comes into, that I remember is you are more than just the social worker, more than just the nurse, more than just the doctor, more than just, you know, whatever your professional role is, you are more than that. And I think balancing it out with other parts of your life, you know, I'm a bike rider or I'm a theater person, and finding other parts to balance things out that bring you joy and pleasure. And those are some really great ways to mitigate and also attend to yourself and making sure that you can be in this field for the long haul and not crash and burn. So there's also a flip side to this, which I really want to make sure we talk about, that's called vicarious resilience. It's not all bad news, right? There's a lot of meaning and wonderful things that we can get from this work. But just like you can be affected by your client trauma and pain, you can also be really impacted and changed by the courage, strength, and resilience. Like I shared, one of my clients talked about hope. I think that had just stuck with me all these years. I have been on both sides of vicarious trauma and vicarious resilience. I have been changed by this work in so many amazing, meaningful ways. I think you hear stories of how people found joy in the darkest of places. The strength, the gratitude, just how they move through things. So I think there's a lot of positive stuff that come out. When you are doing something meaningful, you're contributing, you're changing people's view of the world. You're helping them get to a place where they are safe and stable. So I want to end on this note that there's vicarious resilience as well. Just like we talk about our clients having intergenerational strength, you as providers have vicarious resilience as well that we also get from our clients, who are just incredible. On a personal level, I can't say enough of how much my clients have changed me over the years. Being in this field for the past 15 years has changed me in some really deep ways that I am forever thankful for. So that was a lot. I think so much of this could be in separate sections and in longer sections, but I want to end with just a really deep, heartfelt thank you to you all for being here today in the midst of all of the changes and challenges that we are having. Like I said, here is a link to our website. This will also be in your referral packet, and then a link to our referrals. We've been having a lot of questions coming up in the Q&A section about what type of client. So maybe I'll just say this here and then we'll go to Q&A just so everyone hears it. The criteria for our clients is that they are forcibly displaced from the country of origin. We do not ask about immigration. Immigration status is not a criteria for our services, and our services are free. We do not charge for services. So that will be in your referral packet, but if you can scan it now, that'd be great. And I am going to end here with a big thank you to you all for being present and being here. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Penelope. And thank you, Lauren. We will open the floor to questions at this time. We do have some questions that were in the chat. Some answers are also as well in there, so you're welcome to check that out. And then for those who would like to unmute themselves and ask questions, you're welcome to do so.
I had a question that I don't think was responded to earlier, and it was about the immigration status. Like if somebody arrives, they have 1 year from their arrival to apply for citizenship or temporary citizenship. Does that mean like they have 1 year for it to be processed, or like if 1 year, because that there's times where like, I think someone mentioned if there was like the background check that was missing. If it's just the application itself has to be within a year, or it has to be processed within a year.
Yes, hello, thank you. I think I may have answered that question earlier in the chat and linked a resource, which is why I mentioned that. So it is 1 year from their arrival in the US to apply for asylum. The applications can take quite a long time. That can take many years. So it's not 1 year for it to be processed. The processing time is really on the government, and unfortunately, there is quite a backlog. So it is unlikely that an asylum application would be processed within 1 year. It would take several, 5, sometimes more years to be processed. I hope that's helpful. And I put an FAQ about asylum and those dates, the deadline dates, in the chat. That will also get sent out to y'all at the end with the rest of the resources as well.
Thank you.
You're so welcome, Natasha. Thank you for the question.
Yes, thank you. What happened if the people already been 1 year in the country and they miss the deadline?
Yeah, so there are some very narrow exceptions. It might still be possible to apply, but they are pretty narrow exceptions. So it may be that the person then has to pursue a different path to status. So essentially the window closes on that option, but there are other options, right? So we know that asylum is not the only option. Family petitions are how most people get on a path to status, as we discussed earlier, right? So we want to figure out, is it maybe possible for them to still apply, right? So they have to get assessed by an attorney that could say, do you fall into one of these narrow exceptions where we could still go ahead and get that application in for you and it might be considered? Or what are the other available paths to status? And let's try and start working on applications to get you on a path to status, even if it's different from asylum, right? But there's many paths to status. Is that helpful, Maria?
Yes, thank you.
You're so welcome. This is a little bit tricky because you can't obstruct or interfere with the ICE official while they're in the midst of doing their business, right? And so if you are physically trying to reach over to hand a card and that's viewed as a physical obstruction in some way, right? Like that could potentially create a risk for you. So that's a little bit tricky. Ideally, you would provide those cards in advance, right? Like every time you're meeting with a client, give them a red card right now. Tell them to always have this red card on them, to keep it in their wallet, right? To keep it in their phone pocket if they have one of those phone pockets, right? There's other intervention points, right? Or you put up the poster that says what their rights are in places where if ICE were to be in that space, they could still see the poster up on the wall, right? I can't advise about in the specific circumstances if handing a card would be considered obstruction and if the ICE officer could try to act on that or arrest for that reason. And I think it's a very personal choice to your comfort level, right? Like, what's the risk to you, right? So if you're a person that is a US citizen, that has legal status, who is not concerned about the possible impact of an arrest on yourself, right? You can decide what your comfort level is taking that risk, but every individual has to decide for themselves what that risk is, right? Just like some folks choose to protest, and it's possible that you could be arrested during a protest, right? But many people protest and they're not arrested, right? So everyone has to make that choice for themselves. And of course, if there's a possibility that you could be arrested, you want to have your own safety plan, right? Like who's going to let out your dog? Who's going to feed your cats? Who's going to pick up your kids from daycare? Who's going to pick up your elders from their senior day program, right? Like, so if you think that you might ever take any kind of action that could put you at risk of potential arrest, even if you're just perceived for obstructing and you weren't actually trying to obstruct, right? You want to have your own safety plan for yourself as a provider, so that your family knows, like, I help support folks who are undocumented. It's possible I could come in contact with ICE. I don't think that I'm at risk of arrest, but like, let's talk about what would happen if for any reason I were arrested, right? And then deciding for yourself, do I personally feel comfortable handing a red card in this interaction, and checking in with your supervisor to be like, what's our policy? Right? Like, is that an okay thing for me to do per my employer, per my supervisor, right? Which I can't advise on what your specific employer or supervisor would say there. So feels like a personal choice, but just trying to be risk aware, right? And trauma informed for yourself as well, right? Like we think about safety plans for our clients, but also thinking about safety plans for ourselves and our own loved ones, right? So if we have any loved ones that are undocumented, undetected, or that could be at risk, of interception by ICE, we want to be thinking about creating our own family safety plans as well, because this doesn't just impact, right, our clients, right? It impacts the whole community, which includes us as service providers. I hope that's helpful.
I have a question. Should I go ahead?
Sure,
And
go ahead.
it looks like
Sure.
an answer got posted in the chat about CalFresh for anybody that was looking for
My question is in regards to a lot of people, a lot of the conversation that's happening in the community is that anybody who is not citizen and who does not have green card, and this is anxiety striking conversation that goes on, so is at risk for being asked by ICE. So how would you approach in making sure, and I understand that, everybody have rights and, that conversation, but how do you assure someone, how would you go about it in assuring someone if you have legal documents, especially these conversations are more, they have some type of legal history, but they have done their due diligence in making sure that they have done their programs, done what they're supposed to do, and they have changed their life. And these are some of the conversations that I'm hearing in the community. And how do you assure? And the other question is, I'm from Long Beach, so this is an amazing program where you guys are educating us. Is Legal Link in Lake County, or do you have any partners that have this program for LA County residents?
Gotcha. So I'll try and answer those separately. So Legal Link is in 10 counties in Northern California, but not specifically in Los Angeles. We do at times partner with legal service providers who are based in Los Angeles. And if we get a question from someone, no matter what county or state it is in, we will do our best to triage and provide assistance. So sometimes people will have old criminal record or past eviction that's in another state, not in California, and we will let them know what legal providers are available. In terms of education programs, our programs are offered mostly virtually. So anybody can sign up and attend who provides frontline services to folks. Sometimes our trainings are specific to a certain county, but besides that, most trainings are open to all counties and all service providers. So you could still sign up and attend a training, and I'll drop our legal empowerment training information in the chat. If folks have more specific questions or want to learn more about our trainings, you're welcome to reach out to me directly. In terms of clients who may have a past criminal record and are concerned about the impact on their potential immigration status as a result, those folks definitely, I would say, you want to try and help get them assessed by an immigration attorney to take a look at what was the conviction for. Was it just an arrest or was it a conviction? How long ago was it? Are there mitigating factors? Does it fall into a specific category that's more likely to result in a negative outcome, right? But it's a very case by case issue. So in terms of offering reassurance, I think the reassurance is there are providers available to assess you and to tell you how big the risk really is, right? And then if there's anything you can do to help reduce that risk or to mitigate that, right? You can also reassure them that you can, as a provider, offer that documentation that shows that they've engaged in these rehabilitation programs, right? Like this person has participated in XYZ program for X length of time. During that time, they have demonstrated a commitment to change and they have given back to their community in the following ways. They have engaged in this return to work program or whatever it is, right? And they're doing really well. They have had no, involvement with the criminal justice system in X amount of time, right? So that's another way that you can offer reassurance is like, I am here to help support. My agency is able to offer these kinds of letters of support. Again, you want to check in with your supervisor to ask, can we provide letters of support? What kinds of letters can we provide? What information can we include in those letters? But there's also lots of different forms of support that you can offer in your role. So that's another form of reassurance. Before submitting those letters or bringing them to court, you also want ideally a lawyer to look them over and make sure that the letter looks like it will do nothing but support the client and not accidentally be harmful in some way by including a piece of information that could be harmful in some way. So you want those to get checked over by, or the client to get those checked over by an immigration lawyer. And then I think those same tools that were being uplifted around that trauma-informed services, right? So are you remembering to talk slow and low, right, when they're really anxious? Are you bringing your own energy down, right? Are you reminding them about what those inner tools of resilience are, and using things like those breathing exercises when people are really stressed out, right? That idea of we can breathe only right now in this present moment, right? So taking a pause with them. That was a bit long-winded, so I'll pause there and see also if our other presenters have any other comments on the reassurance.
And I know we're at time, but we're okay for now, yeah.
Okay, so we are at time. We do thank you all for your questions and comments. And thank you, Lauren, for answering those questions. I do want to also remind you folks that, well, we'll be sending out the resources and links and information that was presented in today's training presentation. I do want to share out a special thanks to Lauren Lofton at Legal Link. Thank you very much. And also as well as Partners for Trauma Recovery, Sonia and Penelope. So thank you all for your participation today. And again, friendly reminder, we'll be sending out an evaluation, and we do appreciate your time and feedback on this. And we hope to see you soon in our next training. Thank you and have a great day.